Good morning, everyone. We are officially live. I'm trying something new. I'm doing it from my computer, so hopefully all goes well versus my phone. I'll give everyone a second to log in here. I've received so many questions right now. So we're on May 9th, and I'm probably just now answering questions from May 1st. So I promise if you have sent in a question, I'm kind of going through them in order. And, the reality is so many of these questions and issues relate to everyone because, the as Dr. Ramani says, the narcissist is actually a really simple human being to figure out. And I agree with that. And that's why a lot of us, or a lot of people, when they read my book, One Mom's Battle, Divorcing a Narcissist, One Mom's Battle, they'll email me and say, I feel like we were married to the same person. What's his last name? And so, or a long lost cousin, or they're all motivated by the same things. They're driven by the same things, and um, a lot of it is, they have a playbook. And so, let's see. I'm trying to look at the comments. Tell me where you're from. Where are you logging in from today? I'm in my little I bought a little travel trailer and converted it into an office in my front yard, basically. So I have a mobile office, and I call it the lemonade stand. It is just adorable in here. But where are you from? I am, Rochester. Hello. I have been to Rochester. I used to print a magazine. My ex-husband and I printed an annual magazine here in San Luis Obispo, and so we would fly to print. The printer was called St. Ives in Rochester. Oakland, hello. Texas. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna couple of things. We just got the new One Mom's Battle brochures, and I'm so happy. They're really, really pretty. And you can print these on your own and distribute them in your area after the pandemic is over, or depending on, if you have coffee shops, courthouses, things like that. If you are interested in doing that, go ahead and send me an email at tina@tinaswithin.com. I will send you the link. It's through Vistaprint, and they have offered us corporate pricing. I think you can print 25 for $18, and it's straight through them. You get them within a week. And so, I carry things like this. I carry post-separation abuse wheels. I carry my books. Whenever I'm traveling, I do something kind of funny. I'll leave them in bathrooms of airports. I once put a book last October. I went to a domestic violence conference to speak in Florida. And on the airplane, I left one of my books in the seat back pocket, which I do whenever I'm traveling. And then about probably say 4 or 5 months later, I get an email from this guy who is a flight attendant. And he said, my gosh, it was the weirdest thing. I was talking to another passenger about my divorce I'm going through, and describing my husband's behaviors. And he said, I've been told he's a narcissist. And the passenger wrote back, or said back to him, this is the weirdest thing. There's a book in the seat back pocket where I'm sitting about divorcing a narcissist. And so he went back to his seat, he got it, he brought it back, and he's like, this changed my life. And, so it helped to validate what he was going through. And what I find is that so many people, Maryland, we've got Minnesota, Fort Lauderdale. Hello, everyone. Sometimes, we take for granted that people know what narcissism is. And It's such a unless you've lived this and unless you've been through this post-separation abuse, or been in a relationship with one or had one as a parent, and sometimes even then, if you don't have a label for it, sometimes you doubt yourself. And that's one of the beautiful things I find at my retreats or anytime I do a live event where, just to have a label and have it make sense and be validated is so important. So if you want to print our flyers, brochures, to help educate people and spread awareness, let me know. I'm going to actually, in my email, in my auto reply, I will change it today so that there's a direct link to print. So feel free to send me an email and I'll get that over to you. Montana, I have been there too. Beautiful. Okay, so today's questions. First, I want to say my permanent disclaimer: I'm not an attorney. I'm not a mental health professional. What I do is anytime somebody sends me, a query for advice or whatnot, I try to say, what would I do if I were in their shoes? And in so many situations, I have been in their shoes, or I know people who are walking in those shoes currently. So I share, what would I do? But it's not legal advice, and so always check with your attorney. This woman sent in an email and basically said, my 9-year-old came home from an overnight with my ex-husband and was upset because her dad has been sleeping in her bed every night, and he makes her snuggle and she doesn't like it, but she's afraid to tell him. Every mom instinct in me is giving me warning signs that this needs to stop. I need to approach it in a way he can't turn it around on me. I have contacted her counselor. What we know about narcissists, sociopaths, unfortunately, in my coaching and consulting practice, I deal with a lot of suspected child sexual abuse. And it's one of the most broken areas of our system is people not being believed. And the people who do raise sexual abuse allegations, it can go horribly wrong. And so that's where you really need an attorney who understands these dynamics. And, but I see everything on that scale from full-blown sexual abuse to just lack of boundaries, and inappropriate behavior like this. It's, let's see if I can read some of the um, it's such a difficult subject. And unfortunately, I'm well versed in this one. And so for me personally, if I were facing this situation and my ex-husband made my kids sleep on the floor. He got the bed, he slept on the floor. So I didn't specifically deal with this issue. But if I had, I would probably send Seth, my ex-husband, an email and just say, hey, Seth, something odd came up this morning when I was talking to Megan, and she mentioned that you're co-sleeping with her. I'm kind of baffled by that. At 9 years old, I don't feel that's appropriate. Maybe, this was a one-time occurrence. Your bed wasn't available, whatever, and so what I keep in mind whenever I'm putting something in writing is that the court doesn't know either of us. They want to see just kumbaya style co-parenting. And unfortunately, until they deem the other party is incapable of kumbaya co-parenting, you're kind of forced into that role. And so keeping in mind that everything I put in writing, I have to feel comfortable reading out loud to the court. And so my stance would be very perplexed and not confrontational, not aggressive, not pointing fingers, but it's authentic. I am truly perplexed by a grown man who would sleep with a 9-year-old girl. Um, I'm perplexed. And so that's how I want it to come across so that I don't look to be part of the conflict. And then it depends on what you get back. Some of these people, depending on how covert they are going to, who knows, all over the scale, depending on what type you're up against. But I know my ex-husband would write back and say how ridiculous I was being, and that this is his child and blah, blah, blah. And, but it takes it from hearsay or he said, she said, and it captures it in something that can be used for documentation for court if these issues, keep going. And what I would then do, my second step would probably be to reach out to my child's therapist, probably at the next visit, and say, I'm not really sure how to handle this. This is what was said by my daughter. I told her I don't have all the answers, and then let's wait to talk to Miss Sue on Wednesday night, and maybe you can help her, to find her voice, or, tell me what I should be doing as a parent, or, do you want to talk to him and let him know this is unacceptable? So those are kind of some things that I would do. Let's see. Let me look at some of the comments. CPS investigated his admitted sexual abuse and found him indicated. Courts do not care. No charges, no jail time, no sex offender registry, partial supervised visits in name only. It's one of the most mind-blowing, infuriating portions of the entire system that I deal with. And when I have a lot of moms here in my local area who, very valid sexual abuse claims. We know it's going on, but it's almost too it almost takes the child screaming from the rooftops and publicly naming this person, and sometimes even then, it's just, my heart goes out to anyone who is facing or has suspicions about child sexual abuse. I am a big believer in intuition, and my intuition has never been wrong on these topics. And so my heart goes out to you. um, so next question, I have a 17-month-old. My ex has severe anger, rage issues. Currently, we have a 50-50 temporary schedule, which is insane to me as a 17-month-old. I've seen 50-50 schedules as young as 5 months old with a child breastfeeding. And these courts and these decisions are just, these judges should be put in town square and forced to answer. It's insane to me that a 17-month-old is on a 50-50 schedule, but I see it every day. I am scared for my son's well-being. When my ex loses it, he goes on a rage, shouting, yelling. My little one doesn't talk right now. I'm worried what kind of effect this will have on my child. How do I document? How do I protect my child? What do you recommend? You're going to, if I were in your shoes, I would be documenting every area of regression when my child came back. Even if you took the rage issues out of the equation, separating a 17-month-old from their primary parent is trauma. And I know my daughter was just under the age of 2 when overnight visits began. And it affected her, and for a long time. And when it came to even sleepovers with her peers and things like that, there's a lot of separation anxiety. She's 13 now. I can say she's thriving, where everything is great, but I remember all too well what it feels like to have a child struggling and, pulling up in a parking lot at Starbucks to do the custody exchange and having her just see his car and lose it because she knew that this meant she was going to be away from me. And heartbreaking for what our kids are going through. And that's where the ACE study needs to be the courtroom Bible. And, these judges, I think so much of what it comes down to is lack of education, lack of caring. So many of these judges are highly narcissistic themselves. And it's just broken. So what I would be doing is documenting, or what I did, documenting regression, whether that's sleep, whether that's eating, whether that's behavioral issues, and really showing patterns of behavior that are tied directly into the visits. You want to document everything. I can't emphasize that enough. What is the ACE study? Kaiser Permanente. Um, you can look at, just type in Google the ACE study, Kaiser Permanente. I can't talk this morning. Kaiser did a study, the ACE study, and it talks about early childhood traumas. I know from my own childhood, my ACE scores are off the charts. And it basically is showing a variety of different types of trauma and how that can impact a child for life. And so, that it's something that when we send out our educational packets to judges, it's something that we talk a lot about, because it is a credible, amazing study. Do your best to get involved with the group to promote the ACE study, to spread awareness on it. There's lots of Facebook groups about the ACE study and things like that. So educate yourself on that. But, for me, it was, there's no quick answer to this. When I reflect back on my journey, that those were some of the worst times. And my ex did have rage issues, and seemed to really home in on my daughter's fears, whether it was her fear of dogs, and would actually torment her with those fears. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm putting you in the dog pen. And I knew these things were going on, but so much of it was hearsay and can't be admitted into court. So I had to focus on patterns of behavior over time, and having a really good child therapist who could also document as a neutral third party the regressions and those type of things. I do have here's some links to the ACE study. Thank you so much, Angela, for posting that. It is, yeah, obvious abuse. You're going into the dog pen. I know. But unfortunately, the family, I see it from different perspectives. I see it from the perspective of the judge, because I spend a lot of time pre-pandemic in the courtroom, and there are legalities they have to follow. Anybody can lodge an accusation, but you have to show credible proof. And that's where, for me, one situation would be, hey, Seth, something really odd happened. We were talking at dinner, and dogs came up, and Kailani said, hey, Dad was going to put me in the dog pen. And, I was kind of baffled or perplexed by her remark. And so I just wanted to open the lines of communication. Maybe she misunderstood something you said. I'm basically putting them on notice. You asshole. I know what you're doing, but I'm doing it in a court approved way. And, over time, documenting those patterns of behavior, and especially with my ex-husband who had a drinking problem, there were times where he would fire back. And then it's like, okay, we just took it from hearsay to documented, and he's never going to outright admit it. But sometimes some of the things he put in writing at least shed light on, there's some truth to what I just accused you of, in a very strategic way. So a lot of documenting. 99% of my documentation has never been seen by anyone. That's something I share a lot. And sometimes it feels like it's all in vain, and it's, nobody's paying attention. Nobody's listening. I'll tell you, it took year 6 of my court battle before people really started to get it. And there was a hell of a lot of documentation that led up to that. So I do have a documentation webinar. I think it's on Monday. Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. This Monday, I actually have three webinars, online courses. Though, if you don't have a documentation system and you're wondering, how do I document? Out of all of my webinars, that's probably the one I recommend the most. And you can go to the One Mom's Battle website and click on online courses. And if you can't make it live time on Monday, you can still register. You're going to get the link after the webinar goes live, after I do it live on Monday, and then you can watch it as much as you want at your convenience. So my heart goes out to you. I know what that feels like to have a nonverbal child and somebody with rage issues. I will tell you that when somebody's mask isn't kept on that tight, when they do have those rage issues, it's usually more of a fast track to protect your child than the ones who are so incredibly covert that they would never outright rage or give you documentation. It's heartbreaking as that sounds. That's kind of one of, I feel like, my saving graces in my custody battle. I've copied and pasted Yellow Rock hundreds of times. My ex is starting to do it back. Yeah, you will find that the canned responses, those type of things that we share, they'll start to do it back to you. Your attempt to portray me in a negative light has been noted. And you're like, yeah, well, you put yourself in a negative light. So I currently share 50-50 custody with my infant, who is turning 1 in July. His father is getting 3 weekends a month since we live almost an hour away from each other. And again, this is mind-blowing to me. I would like more time with the baby. At what age do the courts think it's okay for the baby to see the father every other weekend? It's hard. We live in a 50-50 world, court system, no matter where you're at. That's just unfortunately the reality. There's a few holdout states that haven't gone that extreme, but my mentality is you chip away at it. I will not accept that 50-50 is best for my child. I encourage anyone to try living out of a suitcase and bounce from place to place for 6 months and tell me how you feel afterwards. I am really against 50-50 parenting. Unless, of course, you're two healthy parents and it works for you and it's working for the kids, more power to you. But in general, I think this is just sheer insanity. It's so hard, so I would not accept that 50-50 is my destiny. I personally, if facing the same situation, would find a play therapist. It's hard to find at that age. 1 year old is, most of them don't start seeing kids until 2, but that's where, again, documenting regressions and pulling your pediatrician into it. Next time you have a child welfare well check, I would say, that these are some of the things going on. There's regression with sleep, blah, blah, blah. I think that the overnight visits and the separation is really having taken a toll on my child. Here's why I think that. Here's proof. What advice do you have? And start, that's a neutral third party who can be documenting the issues that you're facing. So it takes your documentation to the next level whenever a neutral third party, like one example, whenever my kids would come home with a sunburn or a diaper rash, my daughter started having potty regression because of the trauma she was enduring. And so because of that, she was, having pee in her pants or having accidents, and then come home with horrible diaper rash because he would put her in a pull-up as punishment. And so anytime they came home with any of these things, I would make an appointment with the pediatrician and just say, I can't, I know you can't cure a sunburn. I know you can't cure a diaper rash, but I am looking for advice. How do I handle this? This is a reoccurring issue that keeps happening. And then, again, it takes your documentation to the next level. Somebody said, where can I find the response for yellow rock? If here on my YouTube channel, I talk about yellow rock, and I have a couple of videos on, communicating with the narcissist, but I also have canned responses. I have some highlighted because I love them. Like, your attempt to elicit a negative response from me has been noted. That's a great one. If you don't have the canned responses, you can go to the One Mom's Battle Instagram channel and download it from there. So just click on the link in my bio, and then one of the options it's going to give you is canned responses. So that is where you find those. Let's see. Potty regression. Yeah, my child is a first grader. Yeah, that's my daughter was regressing, and I have permission to share this. She's 13 and she knows what I do, and has, my daughters, their journeys will propel them forward. They've been through a lot, and they're very I have the luxury of talking to them openly now that we are no longer in family court. And so my daughter does give me permission to share some of the things that she's been through. And I'm very conscious of that. I don't ever want to put anything out there that they would one day find and be affected by. So just so nobody sends me hate mail, because I do get a lot of it. My ex has gone completely silent since quarantine started. I know that causes a lot of anxiety in some of us, a lot of us. He and his new wife harass me via a parenting app and text and court motions. I'm enjoying the peace, but should I be worried? Why are they not bothering me? He's very covert. It's easy to go down that, what I call it, the what if path, and it's very fear-based. The reality is we have no control over what they're doing on the other side. And if you're allowing them to rent space in your brain, you're giving them a lot of power. That's kind of and I know this is easier said than done, evict them. You want to get them out of your brain. The reality is, if he files something next week or sends, this built up scathing email, you have no control over that. For me, it's been figuring out what's in my control and what's not. And I've become very skilled at compartmentalizing these things. So, I have had certain days of the week that I would devote to documentation or my case. And, whether it be Monday and Thursday for 2 hours each day, whatever it is, those are the days that I would set aside to communicate, work on my documentation system. And if a thought or something floated into my head on any other day, I would say, we're not going down that path today. This isn't your day to work on it. And it was redirecting myself constantly. And if it was something I was worried about forgetting, I would write it on a note to deal with on my next calendar day. Let's see. So, basically it's easy to stay on that what if path. And I will tell you, nothing positive comes from it. We have no control over what they're doing. So just check yourself and go, you're on the what if path. Let's go back on the straight and narrow and the high road, and not give them this much energy and power and control. Where can I find the link to the ACE study? You can just Google it. You can go online and there's tons of stuff out there on the ACE study. So I encourage everyone, educate yourself thoroughly, educate your attorney on the ACE study. Everybody should know what this is. I know you have mentioned your ex's flying monkeys have reached out to you, and you have made the mistake of befriending them and so forth. I refused to do this. She was very evil during the relationship. I told her never to contact me again. So basically, her ex and his flying monkey have separated or split up. I'm considering subpoenaing her about her emails um, about his pattern of abusive behavior. I know they will be considered hearsay if they are just mentioned by me. Do you feel she would be inclined to lie because she's scared of him? Should I speak on my experience about on the emails or subpoena her? It depends on who she is, I guess. I've had multiple exes from ex-girlfriends of my ex-husband reach out to me. The way they find me is because he likes to talk about my blog, which you would think he wouldn't do. But his presentation to his victim card to other people is that I'm obsessed with him and that I write this blog about him and it's ruined his life. Um, Here's the thing. On a daily basis, even when I'm writing newsletters, and you should subscribe to my e-newsletters if you haven't, whether I'm writing newsletters, doing YouTube, I really, it sounds weird, but I don't think of him as in, I'm thinking of my ex-husband, he's consuming my thoughts. I share my experiences in my head. Seth is this character that every single one of you can relate to, but it's not, it's hard to describe. But so his ex-girlfriends, when they would break up and have a horrible experience with him, they would immediately reach out to me for help. And I've made the mistake multiple times. Some of them have turned out to be fine. Some of them have written declarations for me, which have been very helpful. Um, but then in other situations, I'm like, you're as crazy as he is. So it depends on who she is. It can be very helpful to have multiple stories to show that he is the common denominator in a variety of issues, a variety of conflicts, and that you are not the problem. It can be helpful in those situations. So before I made a decision personally to subpoena anyone, I would want to know, what is their credibility? How well do they present? Even somebody who's going to lie for him and go to bat, they can be discredited on the stand. I watch attorneys do it all the time. And so I guess I'd want to know a little bit more about who she is, how would she present on the stand as a witness, and what was her experience with him? If it goes back to the saying I share often, where an attorney said to me, even liars and assholes are allowed to be parents. And so if it's merely her story about what a jerk he is or a liar he is, then I don't know how much the court is going to care. But if she has a significant history with him of domestic violence, if she can share things that she's witnessed, him as a horrible parent, him berating the kids, anything to where it directly affects your children, then that could potentially be a powerful witness. So, lots of variables. That would go into that type of decision. Um, I have gone through the questions. We're a little over 30 minutes. I'm just gonna see. It's I need an assistant to read comments and help me with this. But let me see if there's any questions. Evict from your brain. So good and so hard. Yes, it is. I think of it as a muscle. The more you practice, the more you redirect yourself. Eventually, it's almost like gratitude. I swear by gratitude. And it's something that I've instilled in my kids, but did it just come naturally to me? No, I watched the Oprah show when I was in 6th grade as a latchkey child, and she talked about gratitude journals. And I started doing gratitude journals in 6th grade. And, there has been times in my life where I kind of get away from it. And when things feel, dark or hard, I go right back to it because I have built that muscle up so much over the years. And it's the same with compartmentalizing our battles. There's a great big life out there to live. And I understand it's hard and I understand your kids are suffering, but your kids need to see you setting an example of somebody who is centered, and start meditating with your kids. Teach them all of the things that we wish we would have learned when we were their ages. I've a couple times during this quarantine, and when I can feel the energy in the house, it gets to people, and every day is different. But I'll tell the kids, bring your pillows to the living room. We're going to do the Peloton meditation or Calm app meditation. We need to be good and centered for our kids. And it's hard to do, but it's so critical. How did you stay so strong? I need therapy. Every day was different. I did have a really good therapist. I will give her so much credit. Writing for me was very, very therapeutic and helped me to process and make, because so much of this you feel like you're in this alternate reality. I described it once as Alice in Wonderland. Like, I fell down this freaking hole and all of these weird characters, family court professionals, and I'm now in a different world, speaking a different language, learning different culture. That is really what this whole battle is. And, how did I stay strong? Every day was different. There were some really hard days, really hard weeks, really hard months where I just, had to go silent. I had to, I couldn't document because I was in survival mode. And I allowed myself, you're allowed to shake your fist at the sky and say, this sucks and this is not okay. But then you dust yourself off and you go forward again because, again, our kids need us to. We don't, but I wasn't strong all the time, and I will say there were times where I came out of family court and I would look at Glenn and say, I feel like a fraud. I've got all of these people all around the world because I had started One Mom's Battle, my blog, back in 2011. And so I had people all over cheering me on, putting me on a pedestal as this amazing warrior mom. And there were times I'd walk out of the courtroom and literally say, I feel like a fraud. Um, I was a mess in there. I couldn't even formulate a sentence. And, PTSD took over and my brain went, and everything else I had planned or to say was gone. And so I had my butt handed to me in court so many times. But again, you dust yourself off and you try again, because those are the lessons we want to teach our kids. And for me, some of the healing was my hands are tied by a broken system, but I have to know that I've done everything in my power to protect my kids today or this week or this month. And after that, it's on the family court system. This is their failure. If I know I'm doing my part, and my hands are tied by a broken system, it's on them. And for me, that was helpful in my healing. But some days it was just I need to take a nap for 2 hours and practice self-care. And that was what I was doing to protect my kids. Because if I'm not strong, if I'm not centered, if I'm not putting on my oxygen mask, there's no one else that's going to fight for them. So, so many comments. And I just want to take a minute before I close and tell you how thankful I am for each and every one of you who join me here on Saturday mornings. I started this because of isolation or pandemic and, being locked down. And I wanted people to feel connected to a greater group, and give them that weekly connection. And I initially just intended to do it for April, but I find myself looking forward to this, and looking forward to connecting with all of you. And so thank you for spending your Saturdays with me. And until next week, everyone, take care, and be good to yourselves, and hug your kids. Okay, bye.